Good morning, Colorado. What a beautiful morning it is at the University of Denver's campus. Welcome to Mayor Michael B. Hancock's second annual Housing Summit, Bridging the Gap, a solutions forum on housing. Thank you all so very much for being here. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. We've done a lot of work in housing in Denver and the region over the last year. We've collaborated across the public, the private, nonprofit sectors to make major changes towards addressing housing issues and challenges in our region. Today, we have an informative and impactful agenda planned to build on our work from last year's summit. We ask you to think about and plan action items on some of the biggest challenges we need to address our region's housing demands. Before we get to work in the breakout sessions, we'll need to spend the next hour talking about what we do why we do this work. Some questions I'd like you to think about that'll frame the day for us. What does access to affordable housing mean for Denver's families? What does it mean to who we are in the region to make sure that all of our residents can live in strong communities with access to opportunity and resources? And who's affected as our housing costs continue to rise? So access, what does it mean to our region and who's impacted? We'll be sharing a few videos throughout the day that were put together by Enterprise's Make Room campaign, a national campaign. 1 of 5 cities was selected. Denver was one of them. This is an issue for our city, our region, our country. The Make Room campaign is designed to highlight the diversity of individuals and families who are affected by the rising cost of housing. Let's start the morning off with one of those videos.
We moved the most between when I was born and when I was 4 years old. There was a sense of we never had any money, even though my dad was paying child support. The amount of times I've moved in the last 5 years is 8 to 9. Every year moving into a new apartment, multiple times having to find a replacement simply because I couldn't afford rent, and then sleeping on someone's couch and just throwing them $100 here and there. Living paycheck to paycheck since I was like 15. From that point on, it was just constantly lurking, trying to find a place to sleep or crash, trying to save money to eventually go to school. Very early on, I was always drawing, to the point of getting in trouble, constantly. My original plan when moving to Colorado was to attend school either in Denver or Boulder. I slept on some floors, slept on some couches, and then just moved up. In art school, I met some really inspiring teachers. I was so excited, loved it, loved everything about it. And then one day I was walking home from school, and I got a call from my sister. My father admitted to a friend of his that he had thoughts of suicide. 3 full days of school, a 40-hour work week. Every other day I was with my dad, 24/7. I literally had no time for school. Ended up dropping out. But it is a for-profit school, and within 3 weeks they were demanding payment for everything that I owed them. Finding the restaurant industry was great. The restaurant family that I have, the owners, the managers, they are really compassionate and supportive and honestly inspiring as well. Just to have someone who's like, hey, you're doing great. The place I'm living in now is a desperate move. We tore apart this grimy basement space. I was looking into apartments. There was no way I could afford them. Moving constantly is definitely stressful. It'd be nice to just have a space that's affordable, clean, for longer than, 9 months or a year. Definitely have a good amount of money to pay back. That is kind of a challenge. I would much rather get a job in something that I'm actively pursuing. Hopefully I'll be able to go back to school, start doing things that I've always wanted to do.
Thank you, Enterprise Community Partners. The videos you'll see throughout the day are going to touch everybody that's touched by this housing crisis we're facing, from millennials to seniors to the homeless to the working folks as well. So we really want to put a face on what's happening in our community. But let me introduce a friend of mine who I have not seen for many years. I actually had dark hair the last time I think I saw David. David Greenberg is with the University of Denver, our host today. David's focus at the university as a vice chancellor is collaborating with academic institutions, industry, government, non-government organizations to create and expand programs that strengthen the strategic mission of the University of Denver. He's the founder of the Denver School of Technology and served as the first board chair of its successor organization, DSST, Denver Public Schools. That's when I first met David in 2003. I sat on a board that he currently sits on, the Mile High United Way board. And I remember David's efforts to not only structure the School of Technology, but to get it funded. And David, you're to be applauded for your efforts and where it's from its roots to where it's at today. So please join me in welcoming David Greenberg.
Well, welcome to DU. On behalf of Chancellor Rebecca Chop and the whole DU family, we are really excited and honored that this conference is being held here and that Mayor Hancock selected DU to be the convener. This is really important to us and our strategic mission. We just completed a strategic plan. And one of the 4 key points is how does DU, in a more intentional and hopefully ever more effective way, knit itself with the greater Denver community. So anything that we can do to help facilitate conversations that move this community forward, we're behind. So DU, we just did an economic impact report, and the university pumps about $1 billion into the greater Denver economy, and we're the 2nd largest private, non-retail employer in Denver, which means that we have a lot of people who are facing exactly the issues that we're discussing today. Because Denver's prosperity, the flip side of that, is becomes more and more costly to live here. So we're very interested in the thinking that's going to help us make a better environment for the people who work here. To that end, we have, in cooperation with the city and RTD and Councilman Paul Cashman, contracted with the Urban Land Institute to hold a 5-day advisory panel here to look at how DU should be thinking over the next 10 to 20 years about the half-mile and mile radius around the DU campus. What can we do to improve mobility? What can we do to improve retail and commercial development? But most importantly is also, what do we do about housing and other affordable housing options in the future? So this is very important to us to get ideas from this conference and to get inspired. So again, I want to thank the mayor for allowing us to be hosting this, and it's a real honor for our community. Thank you.
DU rocks. Thank you, David. We're really pleased to partner up with you today and going forward. I'd like to introduce our Frank Newman, who's with Wells Fargo, our presenting sponsor today. Since 2013, Frank, a 31-year Wells Fargo veteran, Frank, you must have started when you were like 5 years old. It's just amazing to me. Has led the Rocky Mountain region for Wells Fargo Bank. He oversees 3,800 team members with over 300 stores and $28 billion in deposits, business and consumer deposits. That's very impressive. That's a huge, huge lift. Frank serves on the board of the Mile High United Way, the Colorado Bankers Association, and the Denver Police Foundation. Thank you, Frank, for your service to the city and to our community. Wells Fargo has been a strong partner in the city's work to invest in affordable housing, and we thank you for that. In your program, you'll see a partner spotlight on Wells Fargo. Thank you, Frank. Join me in welcoming Frank Newman.
Good morning, everybody. Just a few comments to share, and then we have a very exciting video that we're happy to share with you as well. It'll just last a few minutes, and then we'll get on to our introduction for the rest of the agenda today. I want to just make a few comments about my colleagues. I have a number of the Wells Fargo executive leadership team here today. Particularly, I want to note that Scott Horton, Shelley Marquez, and Maria Sepulveda, who represent our community lending and investment team, are here. And they've done some amazing work that I think is just worth noting quickly. Last year alone, in debt and equity investments, they provided just under $300 million in Colorado, much of that impacting the city of Denver. And so I would say that in addition to our very large mortgage business in the United States, Wells Fargo is all in things related to affordable housing. It's what we do, and we're very proud of it. My message today is pretty simple, and it is that we need to think big and go big as it relates to affordable housing here in Denver. You know, there's a handful of ways that'll happen. It'll happen through, you know, proactive and new thinking around tax strategies. It'll happen through philanthropic work from all of us in a more aggressive way. It'll happen through debt and equity investments that typically are part of much of the affordable housing growth. And it'll happen through some other ways, including direct mortgage lending from all the financial institutions that help provide that. And of course, it's built around a great job strategy, right? With jobs, people can either rent, whether it's full rent or subsidized rent, and they can also make mortgage payments if they are owners. And so those are the ways that we have to think big and go big. We have to be as really forward-thinking as we can, and I can't think of a better group than this audience to solve those issues and support as well the mayor's strategies that I know he'll talk about today. So with that, I'd like to share just a short video on Park Hill Station, and you'll see that our guest in the video, her name is Camille, and her sons, and she can't be here today, but I think you'll really like this.
I love what I do. I work out at Denver International Airport, where I'm a PSA, that's a passenger services assistant. I love helping passengers with various aspects of mobility. I am Camille Lewis. I was born and raised here in the Denver metro area, and I've actually lived here all my life. My family consists of myself, and then I have two sons. My older son, who is 17, about to turn 18, has a cognitive and a developmental disability he's had from birth. My younger son, Mateo, plays competitive baseball, so that takes up a lot of our time. I was very interested in my commute, getting to and from work at DIA, and I wanted to live near the new train, the commuter train that was being built. Also, I wanted something more affordable, where I wouldn't have to worry about the yard or how am I going to pay my electric bill. I think affordable housing is the #1 thing in Denver because we have dramatically rising rent costs right now.
The whole focus was really around allowing low-income individuals to have access not only to transportation, but affordable housing, being able to access education, schools, healthy food options. So residents for Park Hill Station are now going to be able to have access to all those resources that are critical to really have a sustainable community.
What affordable housing means in terms of access to transit is that we can connect you to jobs now, and in a very affordable, efficient manner. And so transit and affordable housing being adjacent to one another, quite frankly, can change and be transformative.
The boys are very excited, and it just fills my heart with joy that I have this beautiful, affordable home to come home to. Living here at Park Hill Station has had major impacts on my life, primarily financially. The apartments have several amenities. Each of the units comes with a washer and a dryer. Oh, the clubhouse is amazing. It has a kitchen, refrigerator, as well as a pool table that's available to all tenants, and it's all secured inside. There's also a state-of-the-art fitness center so that I can work out and not pay to go to a rec center or join a fitness club. And I also know the biggest thing is that I have access to transportation, the most progressive transportation in the state right now. I'm right on the train line, so I can get to and from work, and it's amazing.
It's a beautiful thing when it works like that. And I know we'll see more of that and hear more of that through today's discussions, but at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce our 45th mayor. He's done some amazing work during his terms in office, and things like eliminating the city's budget deficit, just for starters, creating the diverse economy you see taking place across the city today, and creating opportunities for every resident, just to name a few. Our mayor has made affordable housing a top priority. For the years I've been here in Denver, I've heard him speak of it and assemble groups to discuss it and to execute on it and support not only the things we've done at Wells Fargo, but all of the financial institutions, our peers in the city of Denver, to help in that regard. I know he's a fan of affordable housing, and I know he will help lead us toward the strategies we need to execute on a great strategy that's big and positive for the city of Denver. So with that, please welcome Mayor Hancock, our mayor of Denver.
Thank you all so very much. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is a real pleasure to be here this morning, and let me thank all of you. In fact, give yourselves a round of applause for being here this morning. I couldn't be prouder of this turnout. All the movers and shakers and stakeholders and priority folks under the auspices and the works of affordable housing are in this room. As a testament of how important this issue is and how regional it is, this room is filled with elected and appointed officials who are here to talk about this very important issue in the life of our region right now. I know in this room, Federal Heights Mayor Dick Daniels here, Thornton Mayor Pro Tem Eric Montoya is here, Lyons Mayor Connie Sullivan is here, Arvada Mayor, my good friend Mark Williams is here, Boulder Council members Andrew Shoemaker, Lisa Morzell are here, Denver City Council members Rafael Espinoza, Kevin Flynn, Stacey Gilmore, Robin Kanish, Wayne New, and Albus Brooks are here. Tricia Stevens from Congresswoman Diana DeGette's office is here. Rick Garcia from Department of HUD, our regional office, is here. And I may not have had the entire list. This is what we had as of last night in terms of folks who said they would be here. But join me in thanking all of our public officials who have showed up today to be a part of this. As a city, our ability to convene groups together in order to tackle tough issues is one of our greatest strengths. This is exactly what we are doing here today as part of this discussion called Bridging the Gap. At last year's summit, we set ambitious goals and then worked hard to achieve them throughout the year. At our closing plenary session in this very room last year, we heard from our peers about the permanent sources of funding for affordable housing. My team at the city has been hard at work with City Council to build out a plan to dedicate some $150 million in funding over the next 10 years to create permanent, flexible source of funds that can help us meet our most critical affordable housing needs. Also, at last year's summit, we learned about ways that we could improve our preservation ordinance. This past year, our City Council passed key updates to this legislation, which greatly strengthens our ability to preserve affordability of our existing units. And so we thank our City Council. This Bridging the Gap Forum also included an emphasis on construction defects. And while we are again disappointed that we did not fix this issue at the state level, we did make some progress at the city level. And so I want to thank again the City Council for passing a local ordinance to help spur condo construction. Folks, these are the things that came out of this discussion right here at this location last year. And so, as you can see, today's gathering is more than just a meeting. It's a solutions forum to shape and to help Denver be stronger and to help our metro region be more progressive in providing affordable housing. There's no doubt in anyone's mind that housing affordability is one of the most pressing issues facing Denver and our region today. As the video pointed out, rents have grown by more than 50% since I took office in 2011. Half of Denver residents pay more than a third of their income for housing. Our lower income families are hardest hit. Of families in the metro area who earn less than $50,000 a year, more than 250,000 households are paying more than a third of their income for housing. And top it all off, Congress has left us holding the bag in this area. Housing costs are also part of the bigger picture when it comes to a family's balance sheet. Even a family earning close to the median income that has affordable housing doesn't have much left over after other basic expenses after paying their mortgage or their rent. That means they have less ability to save for their future, less opportunity to grow their skills, or even less able to provide for their children. This isn't just about keeping people in their homes. It's about the economic security of our residents and families. Needless to say, combating these trends have been a daily task for us, but I'm proud to say the work to date has contributed to almost 50%, half of the affordable housing available in today's market. I want to be very clear what I just said to you. Over 40% of all affordable housing in Denver has been created through this network led by my administration and Denver City Council. Thank you very much for your partnership. It's a good start, but we also acknowledge that we have much work to do. So our regional economy continues its strong growth. It's important to who we are to make sure that we continue to invest in being a place where our families can attain economic security and have access to economic opportunity. If we want all of our families to benefit from our region's economic growth, access to affordable housing is a critical piece of the puzzle. But investing in economic security and opportunity for our family means more than just investing in affordable housing. We also need to invest in lowering our families' other expenses and building opportunities for them to earn and build wealth. Today's breakout sessions will focus on what it would take to achieve that goal. In the complete community session, for example, we'll ask you to work on better strategies for how we think about where we invest in affordable housing. what other neighborhood resources are critical to supporting the successes and growth of residents of affordable housing. In the gentrification session, we'll talk about strategies that can be implemented by the city and others to help residents stay in their homes where they are already part of a thriving community fabric. Folks in the Think Small session will delve into what it would look like to weave affordable housing options into all of our neighborhoods, even where there might only be room for alley flats. The mixed income session will look at integrating affordable housing into all of our communities from another angle, focusing on building models for developing affordable housing alongside new market rate development. And the vulnerable population session will keep us focused on what we can do to help our residents who are experiencing greater level of need. In terms of the city's long-term housing strategy, we're making great progress in achieving our action items. Today is about continuing to build stronger outcomes for our region's affordability. A great deal of very hard work still lies ahead of us, and we won't be able to do it alone. Again, the ideas you bring forward today are very important to us, and our hope is that we'll have a few nuggets like we did last year to take back and begin to go to work. At today's summit, we're asking you, our partners, to innovate and to push the boundaries of what we can do together. The outcomes of today's sessions will help us pilot new initiatives, change policy in new ways, and change how we measure our work. The work to accomplish these goals will only start today. We are calling on you to continue to move this ambitious work forward throughout the year. I want to, again, before I step off this platform, thank all of our partners. This could not be possible without folks stepping up and saying we will be a part of this. University of Denver, again, Chancellor, thank you for being here, and share with Chancellor Chop our appreciation for once again being on this venerable institution in our city. And University of Denver and the city of Denver have basically grown up together. I think we're only like 6, 7 years apart in terms of our age, and we are inseparable. And so for University of Denver to say, this will be the home where we will sprout ideas and grow solutions around affordable housing is very important to us. To Wells Fargo, and Frank, I can't say enough about your partnership, our partnership with Wells Fargo. From day one, since my administration took office, Wells Fargo walked in the office and said, we're here to help solve this problem. So thank you for all that you do. JP Morgan Chase and Company, thank you as well for your partnership. Colorado Housing Finance Authority, a huge stakeholder in this process. Thank you as well. I don't know if Chris is here, but to all the CHAFA employees and partners, thank you. Urban Ventures, BBVA Compass, Shaw Construction, Denver Urban Renewal Authority, another unbelievable partner, Sugar Creek Capital, Integral, U.S. Bank, Colorado Housing, City, Freddie Mac, Ford City. Thank you to the Planning Committee as well for bridging the gap. Certainly to the Office of Economic Development, the Executive Director, Paul Washington, and our Division Director of Housing, Rick Padilla. Thank you as well. You all have taken the baton and said we're going to make it happen. Even with diminishing resources, you find a way to get it done. And again, to each of you are important in the life and our efforts around this issue. And so we can't thank you enough for being here, to all the speakers who've showed up and to be a part of this today as well. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to thank all of our sponsors right now for making today possible. And now I got to tell you, it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Tiffany Manuel, Vice President of Knowledge, Impact, and Strategy at Enterprise Community Partners. That is one cool title. She drives the collection and dissemination of data and information from within Enterprise and across the affordable housing industry through innovative solutions that demonstrate achievable impact. She also leads Enterprise's strategic planning processes and the continued development and execution with the organization's strategic goals. I know that her bio is in the book. I encourage you to read it as I just did. You'll find she's very impressive. You all, let's give a mile-high welcome to Dr. Manuel, Tiffany Manuel.
Morning. I'm delighted to be here. I have to say that I'm from Maryland, and every time I come into the city, it's rainy or it's blizzard and snowing. And so finally I get to come to Denver and it's sunny. And I'm just looking around, where are my windows? Got nothing, I'm indoors all day, what is this? But I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Mayor Hancock, to DU, to our sponsors today, to the conference organizers who invited me. So I'm going to get right into it. I will say that I am from Enterprise Community Partners. There's a long history of work in the Denver area. And I work on the part of the organization that's about sort of research and development and strategy. And I came to Enterprise about 5 years ago, and I was new to the housing sector. And when I came to Enterprise, I was shocked, actually, that there wasn't a stronger investment in strategic communications, the kind of strategic communications that I'd seen kind of advance the work in other areas like early child development and digital media and learning, and in other areas. And so one of the things I said to our folks is we got to get more strategic communications. And when I say that, I want to just clarify, I'm not talking about social media and giving you advice about how to tweet. You're asking, there are plenty of folks, how to build your social media presence and, you know, how to do all the kinds of things that lots of the sort of traditional communications folks do. I really want to challenge us today to rethink the way that we are talking to public audiences and the way that we are building a bigger tent to bring people, champions, new champions into this issue. And it's not as easy as we would think. And so what I want to do is sort of bring some of the research and data and information to the space around from the cognitive and social sciences that have really thought really hard about how our brains process information, about how we are engaged and how we build efficacy, the sense that something can be done about social issues, and how we move that stuff forward. So what I want to say first is Enterprise has been made with a couple of partners with the National Center for Healthy Housing and from a little bit of investment in HUD and some of our Make Room folks to really try to invest in this sort of strategic communications. And we're just in midstream of that research, but what I thought I would do today is to kind of share kind of the reason why we're making that big investment, why this is so important for us to bring folks into the space of affordable housing, and then a couple of kind of practical examples of what you can use in your messaging today that would help us to begin to do that. So first, why are we doing so much storytelling? So I want to start where I hope you already are, which is an acknowledgement that storytelling, right, is really important to our DNA. It's how we process information. So the old model of having these fact sheets with all these sort of data and numbers, great for those of us who are sort of stakeholders and we're making policy, but for engaging public audiences, the storytelling method of engaging folks is really kind of the best that we've seen. And let me talk about why. So our research suggests or shows that when people listen to stories, they engage with information differently. You sit and you listen differently, right? You ever been to the movies and there's some scary movie and some person, usually a woman, is running from the alien or whatever it is, and somebody in the audience is like, no, don't go that way, go this way. They're doing that because when people listen to stories, they are acting as if, their brains are acting as if they're actually inside of the story, which is a part of what makes it so compelling. You're behaving as if, you're thinking as if you're part of the story, which helps people to recall information better, helps people to engage with it better, and to think through what it would be like if you were in those kind of circumstances. Having said that, there are some challenges, right, that we also have to get up and over. We're doing a much better job of storytelling and bringing storytelling into our work, but there are some challenges. The biggest one that I'm going to talk a lot about today is that the way that you tell the story sets up the solutions. So the reason I have this particular video, not video, but this particular snapshot, this was something a couple months ago, came from South Carolina. Some of you may remember, hit the CNN news waves, where there was a 10-second clip of a police officer who was kind of roughing up a student in a classroom. And there was no frame around it. It was just kind of, here's the video. And that story spun out in 1,000 different directions, but mostly people talked about the people in the story. What was wrong with this guy and what's wrong with him? Or, what's wrong with these kids? What's wrong with these kids today? And the challenge of that was it didn't set up any way of engaging the systems in which these folks are operating in, the educational system in which our children are not fully being educated in the way that we would like, and, right, a system of I would say, enforcement that doesn't always have a way of engaging our youth very productively. And so the challenge for us is, how do we set up the storytelling in a way that sets us up for engaging people about systems, not about fixing people, right? All right, so let's talk about that. So I wanted to start by talking, I want to give you the good news first, before I give you the bad news. The good news is we're doing a much better job of bringing data and information into our story. You saw the initial Make Room video, you saw the video from Wells Fargo, bringing in some of those data points. All of us are using data more effectively. It's incredibly important, and I'm really happy about that because that's the way I keep my job. That's what I do for a living. Without the data, I would not be here. I would say in addition to that, we're doing a fantastic job of bringing in non-traditional messengers. So you'll see in some of the Make Room series, we are using artists and musicians to really tell the story in a way, in some of our concerts on the first, that you don't see in other places. Non-traditional folks who have what we would call orthogonal messengers, folks who people don't see as having a particular interest in, right, this issue. So they have to stop and sort of figure out what's the play there. Incredibly important. Another way, so this is a chart. I'm going to focus on what's on the right side of your screen. And I realize because of the large audience, you may not be able to see this. I'm going to tell you what this is. But this is, we did, as part of the research, the communications research we did, we looked at a full scan of two things. Number one, the 20 sort of largest producers of kind of affordable housing kind of information, what we call our organizational materials. You'll see that in the orange boxes. And then we also compare that to the media. So all of the stuff you get in the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and the Denver paper, all of that across the country, looking at those papers, to look at the content of those in terms of the way that we're telling the story around affordable housing. So there's good news and bad news in this slide I want to share with you. Good news is, this is a chart of looking at what's missing from our story. So the good news is, if you look at the last space here, solutions. We're doing a great job of lifting up solutions, both in terms of our industry, sort of putting out solutions, and also in the take-up of media. Right? We're talking about solutions, the media is picking that up, fantastic. But as we move further to the left, right, the next one over, broader impacts. To some extent, about half of our stories, not most, are talking about the broader impacts. So housing affects education, housing affects transit, housing affects workforce development. We're doing a little bit of that. But the media, for whatever reason, right, the difference there is not picking up on that. When they tell a housing story, it's really about housing. And there's no connection, there's very little connection that they're making between these other areas. The big issue here is value statements, right? So that's the next one, moving over to the left side of that. We're not doing a very good job of talking about values. And values are important because they give people a sense of why they should care, how this affects them, why they have a stake in our success. We're not saying anything about that, and the media's not picking that up either. And then finally, on the other end, explanation. We are in a housing crisis. How do we get here? Whose fault? Not so much about whose fault is that, but what's happening, right? Not explaining to folks why this is happening. And I want to just say, we're doing in the research that we're finding, we're looking very carefully at what happens when you flip that script on that. So this is just this one screen that shows what happens when you begin to share explanations. So this is one part of that. So we did a nationally representative sample, top of the line, randomized controls and treatment groups, looking at what happens when you compare stories that don't have an explanation in them about housing to those that do. And what you'll see across the spectrum is, in all of these areas, whether it's general affordability issues, low-income targeting, economic disparities, across the board, when you embed an explanation of why this is happening, you advance public support for the kind of policies we're trying to advance. So this is just one part of sort of what we're bringing to the table, is that, you know, there are lots of different parts of the story that we need to bring forward, and a part of that is the explanations piece. So now I want to get to the more tricky part. This is the part that I hope will really challenge and sort of be more thought-provoking for you, which is about how, what we call, what political science is called the backfire effects. On the left side of this, you can think of this as us. This is the room here. This is our chorus here, housing and community development folks who are advocating all the time about policies that could be useful for our folks across the country. And on the other side, you might have the public and sometimes policymakers. Sometimes policymakers sort of go back and forth, but certainly sort of broader public audiences. And there is a divide, such as the conversation that we're going to have in these sessions today in the breakouts does not translate very well to how the public understands the very same issues. And so what happens is we often get a backfire effect. We think we're saying something that's so clear and so compelling and so urgent, And the response that we get is very different if you listen. So part of this research is we're listening. What's the backfire? What are we getting back when we put out the kind of stories that we're telling about affordable housing? So there are a couple of different ways I want to share with you, share some examples of this. One of the things we do as part of this research is what we call on-the-street interviews, where we go to the street and say something, right? Several mic and the folks, right? And we give them a kind of really short snippet of a traditional message that you might see. So this is one. You know, the lack of affordable housing undermines the economic success of low-income families and children. When families are working hard but unable to afford rent and other basic necessities, it can make it harder for them to succeed and force them to make dangerous trade-offs. How do you think housing affordability is related to opportunity? So I just took a couple of snippets, right? We're already saying folks are really working hard, they're doing the best they can, they're still struggling. What do you think about that? So.
Life's hard. It's supposed to be hard. You know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You know, all the bad cliches you can think of. I mean, there's been people that have come from absolutely nothing to make it in whatever society's eyes deems success.
Well, the person has to be willing first to change themselves.
You're looking for that Cinderella story at that point. You're looking for the guy or the girl that came from the worst situation possible, but made the most of themselves.
Now I could go on. We literally heard hundreds of these kind of same, right? And some folks were really sympathetic, but the bulk of them were, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me too. I'm middle class and I'm struggling too. I mean, it's hard out here. What do you want people to do, right? The second guy said, you know, they have to work harder. They have to be willing to change themselves, right? Not policy, right? Not themselves. The last folks, you know, listen, this is an opportunity is about the Cinderella story. We're looking for the folks who can pull themselves out by those bootstraps, right? So you all have heard this story. And so what I want to suggest to you is we're telling these stories in a way that we hope will engender this sense of sympathy, and often, not from all, but often what we're getting back is a kind of backfire. So I want to give some other examples, and I'm going to speed through these relatively quickly. This was for those of you, like myself, who came into this business thinking that data was the answer. Like, I'm going to have all this data, and I'm going to get people up and over that. So this is a story that came in LA, and just talking about LA residents need to make $33 an hour or more. And I just literally, you know, pulled this very quickly off the internet. And I just want to share just some of the comments. If you've ever had the scroll down to the comment section, what you see is lots of things. Someone said, as a response to that, that's the part I don't understand. No one is forcing you to live in one of the most expensive markets in the country. If you want cheap rent, go to South Carolina or somewhere that's dirt cheap, right? You don't have to live here. And that's only one solution. The country was built on mobility, right? Moving to places where one can get a better life. Some of us want or need to live in LA because of what we do, but most people can live better lives in the 90% of the country that is not LA, New York, or San Francisco. We might probably add to that Denver, right? I never met anybody who said that they couldn't afford to move. If you're really poor, right, why can't you put your stuff in a couple suitcases and take a bus? Or rent a U-Haul if you have furniture, right, to move. I've known people so broke they had to borrow a bus fare, but they still managed to move, right? I love this one. All the people listed in this example made poor life choices, right? And he goes on to talk about how they didn't do their lives right, right? And I could go on, but the last one I think is pretty important. This one talks at the very end about these sort of the academics. This article comes from these college, these USC folks who have given us this definition of affordable. That's to say 30% of one's paycheck for rent is considered affordable. Anything beyond that is not. Leave it to colleges to redefine these words for political purposes, right? So I want to say, you know, some of you are seeing the videos of our Make Room campaign, and even some of the same kind of pushback is coming back. This was a story that came on NPR that was about Make Room, not the Make Room stories, and it was about a guy who was struggling in terms of retirement. He's sort of at an age in his life where he's very sick. He doesn't have money to rent a house in Maryland, and so some of the comments: a quick Google search found multiple apartments for less than $1,600 around Annapolis, some even as cheap as $1,000 and $1,200. If you can't afford a certain home, do what I do, right? Live somewhere else. It's like poor people complaining about no affordable housing in Manhattan. Do what people who are neither poor nor rich do. They live in Brooklyn or they live in Queens, right? This guy has no job. He'll never work again. If he can't afford to rent where he lives, he should move someplace that's cheaper. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but I will say that you can see comment after comment of comment talking about this, what I call the assumption of mobility. If you can't afford where you live, move out to the suburbs of Denver. Sure, we got this brand new transit system, it's beautiful, right? We're pushing transit further. Move outside of the city or move to areas where the living is not so expensive. So I want to say, first of all, that our Make Room folks are all over this. They're funding a part of the study because we recognize we've got to be able to bring people in under the tent who are currently not champions of our work. If we want to move the support and get greater public and private investment, we've got to be able to address some of these issues that are coming up consistently, and our Make Room folks are on top of that. Let me just talk about just some of the areas of backfire that we consistently get, right? And you can, Google anything, whatever you want to, but from the research perspective, we've got this very clearly. So, first of all, this notion of housing. Right, we throw the word housing around and that's supposed to mean something, but the way that we talk about housing is very different from the way that folks in the public understand this. And we got a lot of that from the on-the-street interviews. And you go and you say the word housing. What does that mean to you? I'm going to play one of the videos because I think it's illuminating in terms of helping you understand. When you say housing, what does that mean? It means for some folks Section 8, right? People associate the word housing with subsidized housing, or they sort of diminish the notion of it to this very small kind of box of a thing. Not at all the way that we think about housing. Housing is a platform for opportunity. It's the way that you support your family. It's the thing that supports you in life.
What is housing? What does it mean to you?
I think housing is like for families who are poor.
The ghettos. Section 8 housing.
Section 8.
Housing for the homeless.
What's housing to you?
A roof over my head.
A place to live.
A home, a place to live, a place to lay your head every night.
Just making sure you're like warm and dry.
Frame structure with a roof, 4 sides, maybe more.
Place with 4 walls and a roof.
What kinds of things determine whether someone has good housing?
All right, so I could play more of that. We had a whole conversation. What determines whether you live in a great house or not?
What is housing?
Oh, let's see. What determines whether or not you live in a good house or live in a great neighborhood? And people talked about mobility. You go out and you choose what you want, and you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you can buy the house that you need, right? For our purposes, we talk about in our field that low-income folks have very few choices. That because of the high cost of housing, it's very challenging. The salaries are too low, it's high. And then on the other side there, again, there's the assumption of mobility. But there are a whole series of other issues that we're just kind of getting the backfire effect. We talk about segregation, in fact, that we need mixed income housing, and folks say, why? The rich people don't want to live with poor people. Who wants to live with poor? That's a part of the American dream. You get rich so you can move to the neighborhood where, right, your neighbors are different. Or from a racial context, they say, well, the Latinos, they like to live next to the other Latinos, or some blacks, they want to live next to other blacks. And there's always those neighborhoods that are mixed, and you can move to those neighborhoods. But for the most part, people choose where they want to live. And so trying to engage folks about sort of segregation as being somewhat driven by policy, we know the history of segregation of that, is really challenging. One of my favorite is this notion of separate fate. So when you start a communications or a story talking about low-income families and you put it right there at the central, the immediate sort of pushback is separate fates. Well, I'm really sorry about them, but that have to do with me. Right, so you watch that video and you go, great, well, I'm really sorry about that for those people. But there's nothing that says we are related, that what happens to low-income people in this community also affects my prosperity. It affects my ability to raise my children, even when I'm all the way on the other side of the city. Other issues, right? So we talk about, we want to lift up policy. You saw the graph. We are lifting up policy solutions, things that we can do. And the challenge for us is, not a challenge for those of us who are policymakers in the audience, but there is a public perception that government is inefficient, sometimes even corrupt. And so you're going to get another government program, great. You're going to ask me for more taxpayer money, great. I know where this is going. So what I also want to say about this too, because sometimes we think that we can argue people out of these predispositions. We think if we just get the communications right, if we just tell the segregation story in a particular way, and if we just get the mobility argument right, that we can argue people out of their predispositions. And what we know from the science is that's not true. And you all know this. You all have the uncle, right? You go to Thanksgiving dinner. You're going to argue him out of this position about affordable housing and why we can do, but you leave frustrated, and so does he or she, right? And so this notion that we have in our communications that we're going to develop this communications messaging about housing that argues people out of this, right, we know doesn't work. In fact, what we know, political science have told us this over and over, is that what people do is when you try to throw more facts and more data at them, is what do? They hunker down. They hunker down in it, right? Look at climate change. We got, centuries of data. I mean, really, you can't get any better than that. Centuries of data. And people say, oh, there's something wrong with the data. Something's not right. They hunker down in it. And so what I want to challenge us to say, the challenge for us is not finding a better message about housing, right? It's figuring out how we get people up and over that. I want to just say some of the other traditional things we tend to do is we think we can argue louder. We think if we get just our story in more papers and more newspapers, like that'll be the answer. We think sometimes that if we just get the lobbyists and we just kind of engage, we can kind of get in front of the public and, right? And some of us, right, there's a part of that works. Some of us think, I once had this woman tell me that, I'm a communications director, and if I can get people to cry 3 times in that story, I got it, right? And then there's all the celebrity, bring the celebrities on, like get them involved. And I want to say that all of those things are an important part of an advocacy strategy. You got to get your stuff in the media. You got to get people who are regularly talking to stakeholders who are making policy. You absolutely have to tug on people's heartstrings to some, maybe not 3 times. Like we won't quantify it in that way. And you got to get folks who people see as important to talk about the issues more than we do. But I want to say that those things in and of themselves will not get you out of the backfire. You're not going to convince people, right, to get out of those notions that they already have about this simply by arguing them out of that or getting a celebrity to say it versus, right, some other person on the street. So I want to say, so how do we survive it? How do we get around it? Don't you want to know? You want to know? You want to know? Okay. All right. Didn't want y'all falling asleep on me. I know it's early in the morning. We got no windows. All right. So I want to say that we're not fully finished with the research on housing. We just had gotten to the point we understand kind of what are the kind of areas of pushback. But I want to give this example, a paper that I wrote many years ago on the early child development space. And I want to set you up for the notion that the solution is likely to be counterintuitive. What does that mean? That means that it's not the solution about getting people to be more thoughtful about housing may mean that we're making an argument that's not about housing. How does that work? So here's a study we did. A group of foundations actually came to us. They had a whole message about vulnerable children. They wanted to get people's greater support for children who were languishing in foster care. For those of you who don't know, our foster care system is busting at the seams. We are having a challenge trying to figure out how to deal with all the children who are involved in that system. And they're trying to get more public investment, more private investment to address the situation. And they had this campaign for 10 years that was running and they weren't getting much support. They asked us to look at that issue. And so one of the things we do as part of the research is have ethnographic conversations. So all across the country, we're talking about this issue with families. And one of the things, this is what you see in back of you is kind of the final report, part of the final report that we shared with them. One of the things that you'll see is that when you go out and you advance a conversation about vulnerable children, you don't advance policy at all. You can put all the newspapers out you want, and all the articles out you want, all the stories out if you want. If it's framed in terms of vulnerable children, you don't get any support. And this was support across a wide variety of issues, supports across mental health issues, healthy nutrition, all the kinds of things that the sort of vulnerable children folks were trying to elicit. But one of the things we found as we talked to people and had conversations at coffee shops all across the country and all kinds of different venues was we were listening to what are the things that made them excited about addressing this issue. And, right, so think about this as separate fates. What the challenge of part of this was the separate fates issue. When we talked about vulnerable children, they heard the traditional vulnerable children's message, it sounded like it was about somebody else's kids. And what folks said is, listen, I'm middle class, and my kid is vulnerable too. I'm really concerned that my kid is not getting a great education, that they're not going to be able to get a great job. And so you got a program that's, I'm great, go off and do that, the stuff foster care. I'm sad for them, but what does that have to do with me? I'm doing the best I can to raise my kids. So it ran smack in the face of the separate fates challenge, and what you see is no greater public investment in terms of policy solutions. But what we heard from folks as we talked to them about what did get them, right, 2 hours of conversation for each one of these was they said, the thing that troubles me the most is that I think that what if one of those kids languishing in foster care is the next Bill Gates or something, or the next Thomas Edison, and we need those people to drive our economy and our prosperity. And what if we're not nurturing those folks and giving them what they need to provide? That's the thing that sort of makes me concerned. And so we started asking more people, what do you think about that? And over time, through those conversations, that all right, there's something here. What you see behind you is a nationally representative sample top-of-the-line research, random control trials. So the line that you see at the Z is the control, right, without any framing. When you advance a conversation about vulnerable children, and you start by talking about ingenuity. We are an ingenious people. We send people to the moon. We do all, and then you talk about why we need to invest and support our children. Look what happens to policy support. The same thing, when you advance a conversation about ingenuity powers the prosperity of our nation. That requires that we have everybody's talent involved in the conversation. When you do that, you advance a conversation about vulnerable children. So I want to set up the notion for you that as we're rolling out this research, guess what? The solution is not likely to be, could be, right, we're still doing it, but not likely to be about housing. So I could talk a little bit about the kind of overall approach of that. I think in the interest of time, I think I'll move forward, pretty quickly through this, and because I want to get to 3 very concrete, practical things you can do at your desk. Tomorrow. What I'll say is the initial research that we have really focuses on what's the backfire. What is backfiring? What's part of the story we call what's in the drawer? If you think of our brains as file cabinets, we make fast and quick associations with things, and the associations that people are making with housing, with affordable housing, with segregation, with gentrification, and the way we're talking about these issues doesn't set us up for success. So part of the strategy is we know we're going to have to open some different drawers. That's a part of what that reframing is about. The drawer may be ingenuity, who knows? The drawer may be prosperity, it may be another drawer, but the notion is to make sure that we've got an evidence base to support the kinds of communications that we are invested in. All right, so I'm gonna end because I hate when academics get up and they talk about theoretical stuff and they don't give you practical stuff. I'm gonna give you some practical stuff that we know from the research, evidence-based, that we already know both from this research and from the bounty of research from the Frameworks Institute. So 3 things I'm gonna have you do. So we think a lot about what makes a message sticky, what makes a story sticky, what has it stick to people, so when they leave and walk away, they remember. They don't just walk away and say, wow, that was a great story. And somebody asks them, what was it about? I don't know, but it was a great story, right? We want to have people sort of involved and invested. And so there are 3 things I'm going to say. I'm going to say, well, number 1, we're going to tell the story of us. Number 2, we're going to explain the issue, right, in terms of systems and people, not just people. And we're going to use social math. So what does that mean? So redirection 1. The whole point of storytelling is that when people listen to stories, they see themselves inside of the story. Here's the challenge in some of the messaging and storytelling that we're doing so far. Folks don't see themselves in your story. It's great for those people, right? Great that lady, she's got a new place and she's going to the transit station. Great, I'm happy that we're doing that. And great enterprise community partners, you're setting people up in those, that's great. But I'm a middle-class person, and I'm struggling with my kids. I'm struggling to make my mortgage payment. And so I separate faith, right? So the way to get people up and over that is you got to tell the story of us. You got to start the message by telling people and showing people through the storytelling why they have a stake in our success. That's a part of, right, what made the sort of story of ingenuity possible. Because it wasn't a story about those vulnerable kids. It was a story about all of us, and that we need the capacity of these kids to drive the next era of prosperity. It's a story of us. We need these kids, because that kid may be the person who solves cancer for us. I need that, right? So the first thing in the messaging, before you do anything else, that's that value statement that I showed as a part of that initial conversation. You need to show people, like, why they have a stake in this, why they should care. The second thing we're going to do in our messaging and our storytelling that we know from an evidence-based perspective makes a difference. We often tell our story from the vantage point of individualized people. Great, because we're getting the stories of people in and you can see what's happening for them. What we often miss are the systems, right? How can they, right? So we want to set up the story in a way that leads people back to thinking about systems change. Because if it's just about a couple people, right, then it leads people to sort of start talking about whether those people are deserving or not, right, which is what you saw in the earlier sort of comment reel. This guy didn't do this, these people made poor choices. But when you start to involve systems, it's a better way of sort of having folks think about all the places where policy making, all the places where we could actually change the conditions related to the circumstances of the people who are being challenged. This comes from the folks in the criminal justice system. They were telling all kinds of stories about incarceration that were focusing very narrowly on the people. And a part of it, we have a whole series of things from the Frameworks Institute sort of rolling out to broaden the story. What about the systems that are closed, and how do you open up those other systems to change the dynamics for those people? So we're not just going to focus narrowly on people, we're going to talk about the systems that are challenging folks. And then finally, in this issue, social math. So social math is kind of fun, but I want to say that, right, we tell lots of stories about, and I'm a data person, so this is the thing that, I have to say something about the data folks, as we get it wrong a lot. 2 in 5 people are blah, blah, blah. 5 in 8, 40% of the people, blah, blah, blah. We've raised the thing about 20%. Blah, blah. I mean, that's the way it sounds to the average public. We get it, because let me just say, for this audience, we need the precision of those numbers, because we're thinking about how you make policy and how you build, right, policy solutions for which you need very specific numbers. But when you're talking about the sort of public space, and they're reading the paper, and they're seeing newspaper, or they're seeing video, nobody remembers was it 40%, 20%, 80%, 10%? Rents have increased by 85%, 25%, 35%, right? So, I mean, really, right? Right? I mean, 2 and 5, is that big? Is that little? I mean, I guess that's big. I don't know. 5 and 8? So we have to, it's true, right? Don't you agree? Exactly. So the challenge for us is, how do you embed those numbers in a way that makes it visual, that people actually remember? And so social math is a way of beginning to do that. I've seen the beginnings of this. Some folks are talking about, you could fill the Denver Broncos Stadium with the numbers of folks who cannot afford their rent in the city of Denver. All kinds of ways they're taking those numbers and making it visual, so that the soccer mom who's on the soccer field, I'm one of those moms, I don't have to remember 2 and 8, 5 and 8, 6 and 7, 25,000, I don't know. But what I can remember is I can say, you know what, the Denver Broncos Stadium, you know what? You could fill the whole darn thing with all the people who have this issue. Or, if we were just trying to build ourselves with this challenge, it would take us, to like 2,000 and something. We can't build ourselves out of it. So it's taking the numbers that you have and making them relevant and credible for folks who have no, they're not involved and invested at the level that we are, and sort of remembering and trying to build policy based on those numbers. So let me just say, putting it all together, you're going to start with the story of us, telling people initially why they should care and how this affects them. If you don't do that, you've lost the whole benefit of the story. They can't see themselves within it. And I'll tell you, if they have to work hard to find themselves in your story, guess what? You've lost them. You've lost them, right? Explanation. You're going to explain, right, what's happening. And it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out kind of academic explanation, but you got to explain what's happening. You saw the numbers. When you explain to folks why this is happening, right, you get major advancements in terms of support. So what's the problem? What's happening? And even, to some extent, who's responsible? Broader impacts. You got to get the social math in there. So you want to give them a sense of the magnitude of the issue, but not using the traditional data source. If you're just throwing the same data out, nobody remembers that. You want to give them a visual reminder of what that means. And then you want to end where we already are. We're doing a great job on this in our field, talking about solutions, right? Talking about the solutions, and not just that these are solutions, but also where they have worked in other places. Because folks are always weary. You're going to give me another, right, some more public, you're going to have more of my tax dollars to do what? Yeah, okay. And you're going to, okay, right? So you got to have them understand that this is a strategy that has worked in other places potentially. If it hasn't, why you think this is the best strategy for us? So I want to just end by saying we are in a really catalytic moment. You all know this. The foreclosure crisis is over. We've got new opportunities in terms of the fair housing conversation. We've got brand new opportunities to lift up this issue across the country in Denver and ever. Our Make Room team and other folks at Enterprise are active and involved, and I know every single person in this room is sort of actively involved in that. But we've got to figure out a way of how we bring folks who are not under the tent to be in the tent. So think about that today as we are talking to the choir. We're speaking to the choir. I want for the entire day, I want you to be thinking about, as you go into these sessions, so I would say that. So, case in point. So my message to you today is that for the most part in the housing sector, we are talking to the choir. We're messaging in ways that are useful for us, This is the way that we came to the issue. When we see those stories, our hearts are boiling over with what we should be able to do. But if we want to bring new folks into the conversation, we have to understand what are some of the things that get them up and over some of the traditional kind of challenges. And I do want to say that bringing in folks who are directly affected is a part of bringing folks in who may not already be under the 10, right? And that means whatever, that may mean scholarships, whatever that may mean practical stuff, but it also means from a communications and messaging perspective, how do we make sure that all folks understand that they are welcome and included in this conversation? That's the way you build an affordable housing agenda.
One more time for Dr. Tiffany Manuel. Thank you. Great message. So we all come from different parts of the city and the region. We come from different experiences, but we're here. We're here now. And so as we get ready to start these critical conversations today, I hope that wherever you come from, that you're willing to share your story, our story, together to get us to some solid recommendations. As we get ready to roll up our sleeves and get to work, I again want to thank each of you for being here to contribute your time and energy today. And as you head to your breakout sessions, I ask each of you to challenge yourselves today. Each session is focused in on a challenge that has been identified by the people in this room, by every one of you in this room, that we need creative thinking on to move forward. And all of them together are challenges we need to face if we are going to make meaningful impact on our region's affordable housing challenges. None of these are easy problems to solve. We recognize that. But we know we have the right people in the room today who can push the envelope on how we think about affordable housing.